Hello and welcome back. It's Leah here. The last video, if you weren't able to see it, you can check it out. I'll make sure that it's really easy to find. It was talking about my interaction with mostly my doctor and how it was really, really frustrating. And I ended up having seizures and there was no diagnosis for a long time and so on. In my last story, I sort of talked about mostly the medical side of things and like how interacting with the medical system went and how frustrating that was. But today I want to talk more about the more like personal side of things and like what sort of the consequences were in my life. Symptoms started where I was kind of like getting faint or getting dizzy when I would stand up from my desk at home and sort of like walk down the hallway of my apartment. A significant change happened in my life when that symptom began. And when my doctor said in response that I just needed to like stand and walk around the room every couple of minutes and so on. And what that change was is that I went from somebody who basically didn't really have to think about movement. Like I could just sort of like get up and go and do whatever I wanted. And I was fairly active. Like I like to walk everywhere. We lived in a really walkable place. I talked about the layout of my apartment in the last video, talking about how it was like kind of long and narrow and so on. And it was like right in the middle of everything. It was right downtown. There was within, I don't know, 6 or 7 blocks, there was a pharmacy, a grocery store, multiple restaurants, like just basically everything that you need for your day-to-day life. When I had suddenly to think about moving before I did it, which I had never had that problem. I'm a young person. I'm 41, but at the time I was in like my late 30s, 36-ish, I think. It was not normal for me to think about my physical activity in the sense of like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Like I've always been a pretty active person. And I think that's something that people don't understand about fat people is that you can be quite active and be fat. To this day, I don't have a driver's license. I don't drive. So if I was going somewhere, I was doing it on foot or I was doing it on the bus or whatever. Like there was a lot of walking around built into my life every single day. Suddenly having to think about walking around was a huge shift in my life. It changed so many things for me. When I didn't have that same confidence and just being able to like get up and go and do whatever I wanted, it really impacted how I thought about going out of the house, walking to the grocery, walking to go get my medications from the pharmacist, like all of these different things that I hadn't even had to consider before were suddenly considerations. What if I get halfway to the pharmacy and I collapse? Or I get dizzy and I, fall down. I was suddenly afraid that I couldn't trust my body to get me from point A to point B. And that was never a thing I had to worry about before. We got to a point because my dizziness was so severe, and it happened pretty much every time I stood up, that I wasn't actually able to trust my body that I could walk more than like 5 minutes. This coming from somebody who, prior to living in that apartment even, had to walk 15 minutes just to get to the bus station. And so that was just like my normal day. I walked at least 30 minutes to and from the bus station just to like get to work, get to school, get to like whatever I was doing at the time. And so that was just completely normal. And I went from that person to having to consider, oh no, the walk is more than like 3 minutes. Can I do it? I was afraid, in particular, after I started having the fainting and the seizures, that I would be in the middle of going somewhere and I would just like fall down and hurt myself. There have been times in my life when I have known people that they fall down and they do really seriously hurt themselves. My final seizure that I described in the last story, when I fell, I broke my ankle. And that was something that I was afraid of. I was like, what if I like break a bone? If I can't control my body, in particular, the time that I felt myself kind of go limp when I had my first seizure, I was terrified that something like that would happen. What if I did it in the middle of the road and I got hit by a car? Like, I had no idea whether or not I could trust my body to get me from point A to point B. I found myself just slowly reducing how much I trusted myself to walk around. And just as I was sort of considering like, oh, I don't know, like, can I trust my body to like walk around? When I really was in the thick of that is when COVID hit and they said, stay in your apartment, don't go anywhere. And so I went from someone who was extremely active and really had no problem walking around, getting lots of exercise, to someone who was kind of concerned about it, to somebody who like kind of couldn't. I still enjoy swimming, but I used to do a lot of swimming. And one of the reasons we moved into that apartment is because there was a pool. Swimming is a good option for staying active, you know, stretching out my muscles, things like that. Like I would have sort of like muscle soreness if I didn't kind of do something. All the way through living at that apartment, whenever I could, I would go down and swim in the pool that we had sort of in the basement of our apartment. During COVID, almost immediately, the first thing that happened was that they closed the pool. I didn't have the outlet of swimming because in order to do so, you would have to go out. And that was what they were telling us not to do. I found myself just slowly becoming more and more sedentary, leading up to the point where I had issues with the seizures and the fainting is when I was really in the heart of COVID. I think it was probably about 2020 when I had the last faint that I can think of. And I believe it was 2020 because I think it was sort of the end of the summer. And I was at the cottage with a buddy of mine who is just wonderful. And we go to his cottage all the time and he's just so delightful. And I had actually had a laughing scenario and I had actually lost consciousness at sort of the table in the cottage where we would like play games and stuff, and actually collapsed against the table and scared the shit out of everyone because I kind of like just arms on the table, knees on the ground, KO'd, like completely knocked out. And my partner was just trying to calm them down, being like, okay, like I know it seems bananas, but like this happens sometimes and we don't know what it is. But that was like in late summer of 2020 that happened. And following that is when the seizures started. So I want to say the seizures were beginning in about 2021 and lasting through 2022. When I ended up getting my sleep study would have been late 2022, I believe. They figured out that I had the sleep apnea and everything. And then by April of 2023, I had gotten my BiPAP machine. And that was when I had my final seizure. I fell and I broke my ankle. By the time I broke my ankle, I had already lost mobility because I had basically become an indoor cat, as I call myself. Like I wasn't going out because COVID had been really a concern at first. And there was the concern about the fainting and the dizziness and stuff. And I had become really used to just sort of walking from like one end of my apartment to the other. But like I had basically no stamina. Like I had no practice in just like walking for more than 5 minutes at a time. When I broke my ankle, it changed everything because then I had to be less active as well while it was healing. And I also had this big old boot on my leg, which made it like heavier and more cumbersome. So it was harder to walk. And I noticed for the first time a phenomenon where I would be walking and it would take more energy than I was used to. I didn't know how to like budget my energy, if that makes sense. Like if you're used to working with just like, I can go like pretty much indefinitely when I have 100% energy. And then you end up in a situation where like, well, using 100% of my energy actually only takes 8 minutes or something, right? Like it's a big shift. You're actually like, whoa, okay. Like I am just like out of energy suddenly. I would just sort of be walking with my boot on And I would just suddenly be like, oh God, I'm going to fall down. I got a cane. And so I would take the cane with me thinking like, okay, maybe it's that I need a little support. So if I have the cane, it might reduce how much energy it takes to like move with this boot on or with this like newly cumbersome ankle. And I can do more. And so I had a cane with me and I would like go around, but I was still having this problem. I had developed what they call edema. Edema is basically water retention, but you get like swelling of the calves. And what it does, I don't know how to describe it better than this. It makes you feel like instead of walking normally, you're walking through knee-high water. Like it just makes like a drag kind of on your legs. I wasn't used to like understanding how to budget that energy. And I would like go out and just be like, oh my God, I'm going to fall down. Like there was this one day, the guy who sold me my BiPAP machine worked walking distance from my house. And so one day I needed to go get something from him, like a replacement part or something. I can't remember what. And so I thought, I'm going to walk up there. I'm going to get, my legs stretched out. I'm going to get some fresh air. And I'm going to walk up there and walk back, and it'll be a nice little jaunt. It's only like probably a 10-minute walk there, 10-minute walk back. I'll bring my cane, whatever. I forgot to bring my cane, and I went up to see him, and I was fine on the way there. And I went and I talked with him. I got the thing and started home. And on the way home, I thought, I'm only like a couple blocks from the grocery. I am going to have a little independence, and I'm going to just go and get like a little fruit or something or some bread or something to have with lunch and surprise my partner. That'll be nice, won't it? Have a little surprise. I went to the grocery. I had gone through the produce aisle and just sort of been looking around, and then I thought, oh, maybe I'll look to the other side. And I got like just to the end of the produce aisle, and I was like, oh God, I'm going to fall down. I said, I have to get out of here. I have to find somewhere to sit. There's nowhere to sit in a grocery. And so I kind of held on to the little bunkers that hold all the fruit and everything on the way out. I was kind of like, I looked like I was limping and about to fall over. I must have looked so bizarre because the lady who worked there, she was behind like the fruit counter or something. She sort of saw me and she chased me out of the store, and she was like, honey, are you okay? And I was like, I think I'm going to fall down. She's like, okay, let's get you to a bench. So she like helped me to a bench. That was super sweet of her because like did not have to at all. Like it was just, she noticed and she did something about it, which like bless her. And so she got me on the bench. She brought me some water. And I'm just sitting there like having an existential crisis because like it's really hitting me hard. I can't do anything anymore on my own. Like I have lost my independence of being able to like walk around. I sat there for a minute. I calmed myself, collected myself, and then I called my partner and I said, I don't know how you're going to do it. I'm like 5 blocks away from home. I need you to find a car and come pick me up. And so that's what he did because he's a wonderful partner. That was such a shift in my life, and it really changed everything for me and my partner. One of the biggest, most life-changing decisions we ever made was that about probably a year and a half ago now, we realized the cane wasn't doing it. There were times when I would be out and I would just get weak, and you can't sit on a cane, right? And so I just said, I think I need to bring a roller with me, like a walker with me everywhere. And I invested in this walker, and it is the most life-changing decision I've ever made. I just kind of like roll it with me everywhere I go. And then like if I have weird dizziness, if I feel weak, if I feel like anything coming on that's sort of seizure-like, I just sit down and it lets me rest for a second, and I can be like, okay, I'm good, and then get up and keep on going. And it has been such a game changer for my confidence. Like now I can go into work, I can go to the grocery, I can go like wherever I want. And I have this tool that will help me to, feel confident to do it. And sometimes I don't need it that often, but if I need it, I have it. I have been doing way, way better since I've gotten it. People see me coming with it who knew me before I had it, and they're like, oh no. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This thing is setting me free. It was such a huge change to my life. And like, I think that there are ways in which, like, I love my roller, but there are ways in which, like, being a person who uses a walker, it, like, changes how people see me, and it changes how I can access things. There are just places I can't go because it's stairs everywhere, or, like, things like that. And so it does mean that now I have to deal with a lot of accessibility issues that I didn't before. But overall in my life, like, to me, the problem is not my rollie. Because if it's not me, it's going to be grandma who has a rollie. Like, people have rollies. You need to make things accessible. And to me, that's the problem, is that like we need to work on making like curb cuts on sidewalks and like having bathrooms that are big enough to move around in with a rollator or a wheelchair, to make sure that we have an elevator or ramps available. All of these different things are just like basic things we should be doing anyway. And so you're never going to hear me say, oh, it's my rollie's fault that I can't do this and that and the other. No, my rollie set me free, honestly. Like, it is my favorite thing in the world. Like, I love that thing. I don't want to go on forever about it, but just that when we have situations where, you know, our doctors aren't listening to us and we don't get diagnosed and things get worse before they get better, and there's like very real consequences for our lives. And I don't want people to think like, oh, boo-hoo, like she had a few fainting things and seizures and stuff, but like in the end she got better and it didn't do anything to like change her life. And it's like, no, like my life has been forever changed from it. Like, I haven't been the same since. And so there's really like a lot of recovery and stuff that I'm still doing. I still have atrophy in my legs. I have edema, so like the swelling and the fluid retention in my legs. To this day, it is an uphill battle to be mobile. And so I love my rollator, but the fact that I still need it, that I still get weakness, that I still get faint sometimes, that I still get dizzy, like that's probably going to continue for the rest of my life. And so like, I'm just disabled now, and that's fine. You know, disability isn't something I think to be belittled or anything. Like, I'm not like lesser than because I'm disabled now. However, it does mean that when you have these symptoms and so on that are ignored and then you don't get treatment, it will change your life. You will go from a person without a disability to somebody who is disabled, right? So you are going to have those changes in your life. I would have really appreciated getting consent before someone condemned me to disability, which is like how sort of the medical system sees disability. I think it's fine. Like, I don't mind being disabled. I'm kind of proud of being disabled. It's sort of like, for me, it's something that like doesn't have to have that like value judgment on it, but it does change how people treat me, and it does change how accessible the world is for me. If that change is going to happen in my life, I would have appreciated like having a say in it and not just sort of being forced into this path by my doctor not paying attention and not trusting me and listening to me. Anyway, that's it for today's story. I just wanted to get that on the record, and I'm going to get a little bit more into recent events and some really messed up stuff that has happened in the past year or so related to hospitalization, the ways that the medical system has pathologized me for being a fat person, just how like damaging and upsetting and like traumatizing it has sometimes been. But I'll try and put a little bit of like jokes in there so it's not too bad. Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.